Yes. Councilmember Widmer.
You can see me. I'm waving at you.
Weist.
Aye, in the suit.
Lempress.
I'm here.
And Vice Mayor Lewis.
I'm here.
And Mayor DeGolia.
Yes, I'm here. Okay. Public comments.
So let me access that. So we have one public comment. It was sent in by Kimberly Wong. She listed herself as an Atherton homeowner. She has two questions. The first is, I understand that all residential construction and services deemed non-essential at this time are halted. Does this apply to homeowners who would like to do their own work on their own, such as planting, plumbing, or woodworking, etc.? Question number two, there has been a builders roundtable to define construction regulations to comply with social distancing that may be enforced once the shelter-in-place moratorium is lifted. How can a contractor join and participate in the next discussion if there will be one? So based on instructions, I've already responded to this resident with the information, and so she should be comfortable with that response.
Great.
And that's all I have.
For the council's benefit, the simple answer to that is that homeowners who are basically conducting home improvements or gardening without retaining someone from the outside are permitted in accordance with the shelter in place to do those activities.
Okay, great.
However, just Mona, this is Elizabeth. Just to continue your thought, to clarify that the individual homeowners cannot be contracting with a construction company to come and do their work under their supervision. That is correct. So to the extent that they are doing their own gardening, for example, or they are doing something essentially with their own hands and not entering into any kind of contract with a contractor or doing work that would require a permit, they can move forward. All other work that requires permits from the town or that would require someone outside of their residence to do their work is prohibited. Thank you.
Is there anyone on the line who wishes to make a public comment? Okay, hearing none, we'll go to item 3. George, is that on, or is that, I guess it's Robert?
It's on Robert, but I don't think Robert's on the phone, so I can take this one.
Okay.
As you may recall, the Stanford GUP application had moved forward in the past, and there were some mitigation measures associated with that. And so the county of Santa Clara allocated a certain amount of mitigation funding that they received, a little over $5 million, toward coordinating with the county of San Mateo and some specific jurisdictions to include Atherton in the southern part of the county for new or expanded recreational uses that serve existing and future Stanford students and faculty. So the town staff met with the county, Menlo Park, Woodside, Portola Valley, Redwood City representatives to kind of talk about those sorts of projects. And initially, we suggested a joint project with the town of Woodside and County of San Mateo to improve facilities along Woodside Road and Alameda de los Pulgas. We also talked about improvements along Watkins Avenue between Watkins, Menlo Park Caltrain Station. And we talked about the channel project at Marsh Road from Fair Oaks. None of those passed muster with the group. So after consulting with them, those projects were removed, and then we were struggling locally to identify any other project. In fact, Portola Valley and Woodside both stepped away from the grant application because they couldn't identify a local project. We worked with the county specifically and were able to identify the park pedestrian and circulation part of the park improvements that we have on our 5-year CIP in fiscal year 21-22. That's about a $500,000 or so project. So based on discussions with the county staff, we're requesting a grant from the Stanford mitigation funds of the maximum for us of $300,000. So in order to support that application, we need a letter of support from the mayor and myself to submit the application to the County of San Mateo in support of that application.
Great. Okay, is there
So
any question?
I have a couple of questions, if I
Okay,
may.
please.
So do I understand that Atherton's portion of this $5 million San Mateo County grant opportunity is about 300,000? That's our
It's not
amount?
an allocated. It's not an allocated amount, but the expectation was that we would get far less than that. So we're actually asking for more than they were actually willing to apportion.
Well, I mean, I think this is great. Not a comment. Then my other comment was, why
we're on
was a question? Excuse me. I'm sorry. I made a mistake. My other question is, I had two questions. My other question is why, I read the staff report and I couldn't understand why the Marsh Road potential bike path from Middlefield to Fair Oaks was shot down or not even really considered, because why was that not even considered?
There were two considerations for that one. One is timing. It needs to be completed within a certain period of time. So we would actually need to fund the difference of that project within the next couple of fiscal years. And at this point, that is not fiscally possible for the town.
Because of that other cap on how much we were going to be getting.
Right.
But part of okay, I won't belabor the question.
Great. Bill has a question.
Sure. On page 8 of the item and page 14 in the pack, where you have the design of the park, since this will be done after the building department is out of there, and since we're saying this is really a recreation park, I think it detracts from our proposal to show the building department and the map in the park, because it's not going to be there.
That's a comment. That's a comment and not a question.
Well, why did we include it? That's a question.
It was only included because it was part of the Google Maps. When we downloaded just a screenshot of Google Maps, it now shows our building department in there as a pinpoint, because that's where we identified it to Google in the temporary time frame. We could probably find a better map for that.
Okay. All right.
Mike, you have a question?
I do, kind of similar, I think, to where Elizabeth was going, but I want to understand better where this $300,000 figure comes from, and whether the fact that Portola Valley and Woodside, you said they withdrew their proposals, does that have, it seems like that should make the pool a little bigger for us. Could you explain to me whether it does or doesn't?
It doesn't. We actually tried to come up with projects, and there was a lot of pressure from the larger communities for projects that were of greater good to meet the guidelines of the grant. Ours is a stretch. We just simply don't have a project that really meets the grant's expectations.
Yeah, I guess I'm asking a different, where does this $300,000 come from? I guess you
It's a
said
number
that like that's a cap. Is that a cap?
It's not a cap. It's a number that we tossed out there that they were amenable to. When the higher we got, the less amenable they were to it. And they kept shooting down opportunities for us to even participate.
Elizabeth, did you want to ask something?
Mike, I agree with you on this line of questioning, because where's the rest of the $5 million going to go? It's
mostly
for
in Menlo
for
Park,
San Mateo
County and Redwood City.
Marsh Road is part of the county, and you would think that that would have held a lot of weight. Would that not have held weight?
It did not. It did not.
Gosh.
And it's really not. It's not the County of San Mateo that's making the decision here. It's the County of Santa Clara.
understand. And also part of that is Menlo Park.
Yes.
No.
My
I
other,
would think with the three of, go ahead.
no, please go ahead.
Well,
No, just with the three entities, we should have been, I think, been in a better negotiating position, but I'm happy about the park.
But my other question is, to take on a question for a minute, is you said it doesn't, you're talking about, you use phrase like it didn't pass muster and things like that. Who are we talking to? Like who says no, that doesn't pass muster at this
So
stage of the process?
staff has been meeting with County of San Mateo county planning staff. And then I've been meeting with the city managers of Redwood City, Menlo Park, Woodside, Portola Valley, and Mike Callaghy. And I'm sorry, and also East Palo Alto. That's on the list too of communities.
So,
and
so
so
nobody in Santa Clara County. This is all our we're doing this to
right.
ourselves. in
And
some
so
way. Yeah.
it's been the county manager of Santa Clara that's been dealing directly with the county manager of San Mateo, Mike Callaghy. And in those conversations, it's been impressed on them as to what kind of guidelines they would accept for particular projects and what their expectation was for where these funds would be spent. They don't have to be spent in our communities. They could just be spent in County of San Mateo projects. So the county offered to share the funds with the local jurisdictions if we could come up with projects that the County of Santa Clara would support.
Okay, I think I understand. Thank you.
okay. Is there any other questions? Is there any public comment on this?
I have none, Mayor.
Yes.
I have no other comments received.
Okay. Well,
I guess through the mayor, through the mayor, can I just ask another question about this, having to do with the San Mateo County funds? It was my understanding that these funds were to be used to help benefit Stanford and Stanford students in and around Stanford University for their commuting and biking to classes and things to benefit that community. I can't imagine. So would some of this $5 million be used in South San Francisco or Brisbane or other parts of the county, or that the county for county projects?
No, it was directly asked by the Santa Clara County that San Mateo County work with the cities in the southern jurisdictions of the county to submit a joint application for those funds.
Right. I just don't see where all the $5 million is going to go. It's got to go to Menlo Park, I guess.
Menlo Park and Redwood City are going to get the bulk of it.
Well, honestly, Marsh Road and a bike path along Marsh Road, a protected, safe bike route for students who are living in East Menlo Park or East Atherton area, East Redwood City, to bike into down Marsh Road and through Middlefield Road to go to Stanford, I think would be a priority. But anyway, that's my comment.
Comment to the mayor?
Yes, please, Kerry.
Yeah. I have the same kind of thought process that I'm sure everybody here does. This whole philosophy that everybody can cut through Atherton, and that this is obviously something proportionately, 300,000 is nothing in a $5 million component. So, we do have, bike projects and so on and so forth. And this is a small project that, attributes to the recreation component of potential Stanford students. We have Stanford students that live in town all over the place that commonly use our bike paths, et cetera, et cetera. So it is perplexing that, the value of our southern portion of the county is only 300,000 with the amount of impacts we get related to everything else. So that's the end of my comments.
Okay,
Just a quick question here or comment.
go ahead, Bill.
I noticed that I think one of the most logical things that would aid the residents of the area as well as going to Stanford would have been the proposal that it seems that in the write-up, George, we made on bike lanes on the Alameda. And was there any feedback on that? Because that would seem to be something that would, first off, people enjoy riding that area and going out to Woodside and things like that. But secondly, it would aid Stanford University for the commuters, especially from Redwood City.
The bike lanes on Alameda, they determined already existed. So they want to improve or make new or better projects.
Okay. All right. No problem. Well, anyway, appreciate
Well, I'm
you
happy
trying.
about the park. Yeah, I'm happy about the park. I think it's great. I mean, if we can,
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
the park is good, but at the same time, if we could do the park and improve the bike lanes, that would be another good thing. But okay. Thank you very
exactly.
much.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the biggest project that, sits out there in front of us is the Marsh Road improvement to put a boardwalk over the channel and make a bike lane. But it presents a challenge when you get to Menlo Park or to the county where it
I think he froze.
toward the bay.
There he is.
Looks like you froze a bit, Rick.
Yeah, my internet connection goes in and out, I think. I was just saying, I think Marsh Road is the big plan, but, this is political. There's a relatively small dollar amount coming to San Mateo County compared to Santa Clara County. And I think if we can get some money to go to help with the improvement in the park, that'd be great. I do think in the long run, the Marsh Road project is the big project that we'd like to see happen. But I also think that there's some impediments there because we don't really have a solution once you hit the 2-lane road. And
Well, I think that can be mitigated pretty easily, actually.
well, but there needs to be a strategy around it, and that strategy doesn't exist. That's not the item on the agenda,
True.
but I think that
True.
is an issue. So I think
Good.
you've got the direction you need, George.
I actually need, I need a council motion to authorize the mayor to execute the letter.
So moved.
Second.
And then a roll, and then a
We're gonna
roll
need
call for that.
we're gonna do the roll call vote. So if I could just go down the line, Councilmember Widmer,
Aye.
Weist,
Aye.
Lempress,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Lewis,
Aye.
and Mayor DeGolia.
Aye. Okay, we're now moving on to item number 4, the Atherton COVID-19 response updates.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of the council. There hasn't been a lot of change since our last meeting. No new shelter-in-place revisions or modifications that really impact the town. So all you're doing today is just certifying the continuation of the emergency proclamation.
Okay. And is there any public comment? Hearing none, I skip questions if someone has a question. Okay, any comments? If no comments, do I have a motion?
I move that we continue the state of emergency here until we review it again next week.
Okay, I'll second that. Can we do a roll call?
Yes, sir. Widmer,
Aye.
yes. Weist,
Aye.
Lemprus,
Aye.
Lewis,
Aye.
and DeGolia.
Yes. That brings us to item number 5. Determination of the continuation of construction on the administration and police facility as an essential government function. George.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. On the 31st of March, the County of San Mateo enacted an extension of their shelter-in-place order through May 3rd. Part of those restrictions provided a prohibition of private construction, allowed the continuation of public infrastructure projects, and those were listed within the order specifically. But it also provided that public works projects could continue if specifically designated in support of an essential governmental function by the lead governmental agency. So at last week's meeting, the council had a conversation around whether or not to allow the continuation of portions of the town center project, not the library portion of the building, but the town center itself, the city hall and police department area, as being an essential governmental function, and therefore qualifying under that section 4 of the order. In order to do that, the council needs to designate it as an essential governmental function. That's what you would be doing this evening. You asked the contractor to provide you with an operations plan, to work with staff to put together an operations plan on how they would operate the construction activity under the guidelines of COVID-19. They've done so. They worked with staff to do that, and attached to the staff report is a 17-page exposure prevention and preparedness and response plan for the town center project. It includes a couple of the guidelines that the town put in there in terms of screening of the workers as they come on site, those screening questions, as well as a number of guidelines for prevention and preparedness and cleanliness of the site. So with that, it concludes the staff report, and the recommendation would be that the council determine that the continuation of construction on the administration and police department facility constitutes an essential function and thereby allows it to continue subject to the guidelines adopted herein.
Okay, are there any questions from members of the council? Bill, you have your hand up?
Yep. So I have three questions. I've gone over the report and what was submitted. And I thought when we had this conversation, there was a discussion about that there would be a schedule, that people would be looking at what needs to get done when, so that people who could work independently would be there. And I didn't see that in the report. I didn't understand really, and would like the Amoroso to comment if they're on, hopefully they are, about the situation with somebody's testing positive, just stay away for 7 days. Why not longer, like many of the regulations are saying? I didn't understand why we wouldn't be cleaning the restrooms, at least at a minimum, the door handle after each and every use, as opposed to only 3 days. And I didn't understand what the logic was with not requiring mouth and nose coverings, as has been recommended by the governor as well as here in the county. So were there any reasons that those things were not included in this?
Yeah, hi, this is Bob Erskine, the president of Amherst. I was on the call last week as well. And, as we discussed last week, and we wanted to get something into town council's hands as quickly as possible. This is very fluid, and we're getting changes almost daily throughout various jurisdictions throughout the state. So one of the things that we will be doing, and I would have to go through that plan, because we intend to also include a security guard at the entrance to do the actual screening questions. Obviously, we don't know the outcome, so that security guard may be in the form of one of our staff members until we deploy a security guard, but that would be part of our plan. The face covering, we've had a long discussion about that. We are going to strongly encourage face covering. That's going to be part of our plan. We're trying to follow guidelines versus mandates and really distinguish between those two. but we are certainly going to strongly encourage. One of the other areas that we discussed a little bit last week with the town's construction representatives, and that is with respect to encroaching on that 6-foot social distance mandate for certain activities. Since we provided this plan, we have received additional clarity and we'll be amending our plan. There is the ability to encroach on that 6 feet for certain activities, but there's very strict guidelines to follow, as well as very clear PPE, N95 respirators, goggles or face screen, gloves, and it has to be approved by our safety director for that encroachment. So that's, at least we have some clarity, because we've been getting a lot of pushback from subcontractors on other projects saying certain tasks just either are not safe or simply cannot be completed. So that was something we addressed over the last couple of days. With respect to the
has to do here. Hi, this is Jennifer Erskine. I'm the project manager with Amoroso. While Bob reviews the information on the 7 days plan and can speak to that, I can speak to Bill's question about the schedule. Things are still fluid. So we're still, now that we've been shut down, we're in the process of finding out what subcontractors can in fact remobilize with the appropriate size crew that we had before. Before we had the shutdown, we had our electrician on site, we had plumbers, we had iron workers, we had a contractor who's doing our underground for our fire water, and we had Amoroso on site as well. Occasionally we'd have some other contractors who would come in for day or a couple of day tasks, as well as we have a contractor who's spreading metal deck. Most of those activities that were occurring prior to the shutdown can still be safely done within the 6 feet distancing that we have looked at. And that is something that we will still stay in communication with our foremen and our subcontractors when we implement this plan with, once we are able to remobilize.
Yes, and Bill, I want to go back through that positive COVID-19, because the way, and we had legal guidance on this, was with respect to after somebody's positive, they self-quarantine for the proper period of time. Then there's the number of days that they have been symptom-free. I think that's really what we're addressing.
Correct.
But I will certainly clarify that, Bill, with our safety director.
Okay. A follow-on question for you then is, it's been publicized now that, that there is a test to see who's actually immune from it. Have you all looked into finding out what it takes to get some of your people, your critical people, tested there? Is that even going to be possible? Because if they're immune, obviously, yeah, for sure they could work there. And is that an avenue that you also either have or are willing to at least go down?
We most certainly would. Right now, we have not explored that testing option. We have calls literally daily, conference calls with our safety group and our leadership, trying to make sure we're doing best practices. In some cases, you'll see we're actually going, in particular in Southern California, since they were a little later to enact some of these policies, we were out in front of it and having stronger guidelines. But to answer your question specifically, we have not looked into those immunity tests at this point.
Just FYI, those tests are, in fact, our police department's looking into a clinic that would be able to provide them with that antibody test. And if so, we may be doing that. But at this point, it's just for first responders, unless you're going through your primary care and can access it that way. We've heard that at the federal level, they're trying to disperse these within the next couple of weeks by regions, but we still don't know for whom they would be available. And lastly, you still could have the antibodies but be symptomatic. So there's that sort of challenge related to that.
Can I put a follow-up question to Bob on something he said?
Yes.
Thank you, and through the mayor, thank you. I apologize for stepping in. But I just looking at a point of clarity, when you mentioned the 6-foot distance rule and people that can't follow that, you mentioned that you've got the implementation of the N95 goggles and face masks. Does that sound correct? So whenever that's something can't happen, that the protocol would be to, guidelines to N95 goggles, face masks.
Yeah, so what protocol we're publishing actually tonight to all of our sites and all of our trade partners is, after we receive that clarity, is anybody who believes their activity or a specific activity requires encroachment on that 6-foot social distance protocol will be submitting a variance request specifically to us, to Amoroso. With that, they'll include a statement as to why there is no other engineered solution. They will also be providing us fit tests that the employees that will be utilizing the N95 masks have been fit tested and had the proper pulmonary tests, and also are utilizing gloves, goggles, or shield, and any other PPE that may be necessary for that specific task. If they're doing welding or something else, there's obviously other PPE that would be required.
And if I could add to this, this would be paperwork that we would be gathering in addition to the current paperwork that's a part of our plan that is submitted daily to Marty and Michael. So this isn't something that, this will also have the Town of Atherton oversight on a daily basis.
Thank you, Bob and Jennifer.
Yes.
Mayor DeGolia, this is Anthony.
Mike,
Okay.
Mike, you have a question?
I do, and I have a few, and thank you very much, Mr. Erskine, for staying on. And I apologize. Is it Jennifer? Is that the other?
Yes, sir, it is. Thank
Terrific.
you.
I have a few questions, and I hope they can be quick. One is, I'm just curious about workers, and and their incentives. Are they paid? What happens if somebody says they're not able to show up because they've been exposed, say at home or somewhere else? Are they paid, or are they sitting at home for a week or more without pay? How does that work?
No, they are paid through sick leave.
Through sick leave. Okay, even if they don't have any symptoms or anything else, they're just simply.
Yes, so
Okay.
the distinguishing factor, and this is yes, if they believe they have those symptoms, it's different than if somebody just feels that I'm concerned about going into the public, therefore I don't want to go to work. That's a different situation.
Gotcha.
Yes.
Okay. And have you had anybody perform what I'll call a health review, a health department or a doctor who's just looked at this and said, yes, this meets our standards? And if so, who would that be?
Yeah, actually, this document, or a portion of, obviously not the town specific items, was prepared by a law firm and distributed to all the large general contractors in Northern California, so that we're all somewhat adhering to the same guidelines. There obviously can be some site-specific information that maybe need to change, but no, it has been vetted by
a law firm. Is your understanding that law firm got some kind of sign-off from either a health department or a doctor's group or a doctor or somebody who signed it? Do you know?
I know they were coordinating with the state of California and the San Francisco Health Department and the CEA safety group. As far as sign off, that they did not represent that to me.
Okay. And another question is, what is your understanding of sort of enforcement and potential sanctions for violations?
I'm not sure if sanctions, given that the social distancing is a mandate, we're not on the law enforcement side of things. I'm not exactly sure how the county sheriffs would look at it. I'm not exactly sure. For us, what we are going, and our safety directors and our safety officers will physically remove people from the site if they are not following our procedure. And our procedure and protocol and action plan will be reviewed with the supervisors from those subcontractors every morning before work starts.
Got it. George, what's your answer to that
Reinforce those
question?
policies. Yes. Yeah, just continual reinforcement.
Right.
Yes.
George Roberts,
Yeah.
what's your answer to the question about enforcement and potential sanctions?
Well, if the town identifies that they are not following the protocols, and we will have staff on site as well, not Marty, but I believe Steve Tyler will be there off and on throughout the project. It gets shut down. That's our remedy.
Yeah.
Okay. And then I think
Mona, do you have a question?
I just wanted to add to that. The town certainly does retain the discretion to shut down the entire project site. However, the county health official has also admonished all local cities, police departments, and sheriffs to actually enforce the shelter-in-place restrictions, whether that's through citations or misdemeanors. So those are individually incurred as well for violations of these.
Great. And last question, and I promised my last question on this is for the town. I was looking at the questionnaire, and we ask about out-of-state travel. I find that very interesting. Why? Where are we going to with out-of-state travel? If somebody drives in from Arizona or Nevada, they're not eligible to work for a week. Is that right?
No, the genesis of that question was from the Builders Roundtable group, and that we had a conversation around as the screening questions, and it was crafted actually a week ago, and a lot has changed since then. So a week ago, there were some high-profile states such as New York or others where there were concerns if staff were coming in from those directions. But we didn't want to unreasonably restrict somebody who's coming in from Arizona or New Mexico or Utah, where they just dropped their kid off at college or something and they're coming back. So it's just a screening question. It's not a bar from the site.
Okay, thank you.
I do have a couple of other questions though, Mr. Mayor.
Go ahead.
Now, following up on Mike's question about sick leave, Bob, Jennifer, you mentioned that there would be paid sick leave. Is that just for your staff, or does it cover the subs? And is that your program, or is it some sort of other federal or state program?
Well, it's our program for our employees. Many of the subcontractors have various collective bargaining agreements that they would be following. And then there's the, I forget the exact acronym, but what the federal government just issued with respect
The CARES Act?
Yes, to this issue.
Okay.
And we have published that to all of our employees, the CARE Act as well.
Great. Are there any other questions? Okay, hearing none. Is there any public comment, either that you have received, Anthony, or from someone on the line who would like to make a comment?
I've received none.
Okay. Hearing none, we'll bring it back to the council. Comments on the council. Bill?
Yeah, so first off, I think Bob, yourself, and incorporating the Builders Roundtable have made a lot of progress, and I commend you for that. However, I did hear you say that, hey, you know, we're still updating this document, and yeah, and so I'm not sure, you know, that, and I agree with you. Some of the areas still need to be updated, and some of the processes need to be updated. So, you know, I'm concerned about moving ahead before we actually see where we are. Following up on Mike's comments, I don't think it would be a bad idea to ask the county health department to look into this, or have a physician look at this and see what they have to say. I think that I've reached out to some of our neighbors and asked them, explain where we are, and asked them, are they doing construction for public works projects that aren't going to be done in the short term? And the answer has come back that they're not. That they feel that we're still, and I agree with this, by the way, that we're still, you know, 7 to 10 days at least from the peak, and that you know, no one really feels comfortable. And I personally, I'm not comfortable until we hit the peak and we start coming down. this would be a project that would be one of the first things that I think that should be reopened, as well as landscaping and things like that, where that we're minimizing the attack. Let's see here. You know, I wouldn't want to have something where we're going to restart the spread. And so, you know, I got the impression that if you were still updating it, if you had another week, it might be a little more maybe certified. And honestly, I would be more comfortable. You know, I'm interested in the safety of your employees and the subs. And I think that as well as their families and the people that they interact with. And I just think really this could become a problem. Plus, they're probably going to want a food truck to come by. I don't know. We didn't really discuss that, whether or not the food trucks are going to be able to access this site. But that's another issue that I think we need to address. And I would personally want to say, no, we're not going to have food trucks, but that wasn't covered anywhere. And, you know, everything else was going so swimmingly, I didn't want to interject with another question. But it's another thing that I think we need to consider. So I'm a lot more comfortable than I was last week, but I'm not there, especially given where we are, still rising, and hopefully going to hit the peak and come over in a week or 10 days. So, you know, at the next meeting, I might feel differently, but at this point in time, I'm still concerned, and I would appreciate it if you would continue cleaning up this, you know, and making this a little bit more robust. I do appreciate the fact that, since I brought up the fact that many of the items that you're doing based on where you are in the construction are not going to allow the social distancing. So I appreciate the fact that you have brought that up and are addressing that. And I see that that's an excellent step forward, but you know, that's where I am right today. So thank you for all the work you're doing. And I think we're still about a week away.
And Bill, I just, and I appreciate that. And when I want to make sure I'm clear when we say we're updating it as new information, new mandates, or new recommendations come to light.
Well, okay, but you know, I mean, they're all the time, and you know, I mean, I read an article in the Times today that said that the governor was thinking of extending the Stay-at-Home Act until August. You know, so you know, I think that things are changing, and there are new executive mandates that come out. I was on a call today, you know, to come out with almost three a day. So I appreciate what you're saying. I would like to see a doctor look at this and provide you that feedback. I don't think that, you know, and understand what that doctor might say. Maybe the health department would be interested in it. You know, I've spoken to our county manager and told him that we were putting this roundtable together and looking at the things, and they might be interested in this to share as we start reopening. So again, good work. I appreciate what you've done.
Bill,
Through the mayor.
this is Jennifer with Amoroso. In response to your comment about the food trucks, that was already established in the subcommittee and was a known fact that food trucks are not allowed. So that wasn't put in our specific plan because that was something that had already been established and that we will be maintaining.
Okay, well, I appreciate you telling me that. Thank you
problem.
very much. Right.
Are there other comments on the council?
Yes, through
Please.
the mayor. This is Elizabeth.
Go ahead.
Thank you. So a couple of questions having to do with how long that will it take Amoroso to restart some of the work? And if we give them a go-ahead tonight, how many people would be on the job tomorrow? Or would it take a few days because we don't work on the weekends at this point? Or I don't know, maybe we're working Saturdays some because we approved that. But would it take another 3 to 5, 4, 6 days to really kind of gear up again? That would maybe make Councilmember Widmer feel a little better about waiting a week, that it's a slower process. So that's one question. And then I have another.
No problem. Ms. Lewis, this is Jennifer with Amoroso. So currently, of the subcontractors that would be available to remob, should we have an approval this evening, it would really only be Amoroso and maybe one other subcontractor for the rest of the week. The other contractors will have to go and find the labor force that they either relocated and or had to lay off due to the suspension of work. In addition, we tentatively also have a larger trailer for our office staff coming if we do remob, so we can also maintain the 6-foot clearance for anyone who has to enter into the trailer, as well as those who are of the management staff as well. So we have prepared Marty and George in saying that it could take up to 2 weeks to be up to the capacity we were at before the suspension.
So I'm sure that you as a business operator, because I've been experiencing the same thing with my business over the last 3 weeks, that the business has to kind of continue on because we are in essential services managing property. And there's a core group of people, and every day that kind of core group of people go into the office and it's a much reduced capacity, that I am nervous that everything is wiped down, the handles are wiped down continuously, and that there's not group meetings. You know, I'm not there, I can't manage it, but I have to depend upon my managers and key personnel to make sure that they are safe and they keep the people that have to come in and do the work safe. So I'm sure that you do not want on your shoulders your employees or your subcontractors' employees to become contaminated because of you having them come and work. And so to the extent that you can do the very, very best that you can and make sure that they're not bringing in the disease to your environment by taking the temperature and asking the questions. And if they have symptoms, I was a little, I did not feel very comfortable with your page 7 of 17, page 7, and it's the paragraph about employee test positive for COVID-19. I just felt that that was not the length of time that either the CDC or other general guidelines are being given for sheltering in place. So I'd like to see that beefed up a little bit, but I do feel that we are an essential business, and I would love to see us start the process, but with extreme measures. And I thought that overall your program was well written, and but like Mike, who put their rubber stamp of approval, the good housekeeping seal of approval on it. And if it was just an attorney group, I'm not that comfortable. I would like to have more of a health officer give us their stamp of approval.
And this is Bob again with Amoroso. So I just want to clarify, and again, I will certainly reach out to the organization and find out who from the health department, who, if any, is signed off or that they got input from. But I want to clarify on the test positive. The way we have structured this is you still have all the 14-day self-quarantine. This is actually after. So employees that test positive and are symptom-free may return to work when at least 7 days have passed since the date of which first test or first positive or have not had a subsequent illness. Employees that test positive that are directed to care for themselves at home may return to work, one, at least 72 hours, 3 full days have passed since recovery, and at least 7 days have passed since symptoms first appeared. So I will clarify that, but I believe this is all in context after recovery. So additional period of time after recovery, not your have the symptoms or diagnosed and then self-quarantine. But I will certainly
I
clarify.
see. Yeah, that would be good. Thank you.
Sure.
Are there any other comments? Carrie?
Oh, thank you. I'm sorry. I was sitting here playing with my mute button.
I could hear you.
Yeah, my lips were moving. Can't you see? First of all, I want to really commend everybody that worked on this process, because it's been a very difficult but a very engaging process with everybody, and both Bob and Jennifer have been part of it. I will say that I am pleased, but I'm pleased that we've gotten this foundation and that the OSHA requirements and this additional layer of the onion that Amoroso's come forward with. I appreciate the additional comments made by both Bob and Jennifer related to the detail of, when an encroachment of that the 6 foot requirement comes into play, and that additional measures would be put into play. I do like the fact that you actually have on-site capabilities of monitoring this, as well as we have several people on site that would have the potential monitoring. I do, as some people would say, attorneys are in, sometimes the information gets a little diluted. I picked up some of the same things Elizabeth had, and I appreciate your additional comments, Bob. I'm kind of in the direction of, I know that ramp up time is going to be a period of time. I'm sure that you're probably not even going to be at 25% probably for the next week, maybe even 2. That, is a significant difference in workforce, plus the guidelines that they would have to follow just to get onto the site, which I think is good. I do consider this building an essential service, and I do appreciate with the operation of these additional measures put into play, I'm interested in moving forward.
Okay. Mike, did you want to make a comment?
Sure. And something that we're all struggling with. And I think, by the way, Jennifer and Bob, I think you're approaching this in the same spirit we are, which is, let's make sure we're doing this in as safe a way as we can if we're going to move forward. I think my sense is that this is going to be a changing environment for a while. And if we're waiting for a magic moment when it's going to suddenly feel safe, we're not going to get one where there's just a bright line that we pass of some sort. So I think what I would like to do, if I could suggest, is that I'm comfortable with us moving forward with these guidelines in place. I think, though, that we should make sure that we institute some very close monitoring, and at the first sign of a problem, and I don't think that's one case, but if it's maybe 2 cases that pop up, maybe it is 1 case, then we shut it down immediately. We don't wait a week, we don't wait 3 days, or whatever that is. But I do think that these efforts are as good a mitigation as reasonable people can come up with to still proceed and move forward, given what we know now. So I guess I would just urge we continue to monitor. If we do decide to move forward, and I am comfortable with moving forward in these things, we would monitor it very closely. We'd get, during our regular weekly reports, we'd get reports from our staff about what's been done, any changes to these guidelines, and by changes I mean tightening of these guidelines as more as we're learning more, and obviously if there's any sign of COVID, that we evaluate that immediately and be very conservative about pulling the plug if something goes wrong there. So that's where I am. Having said that, I am also very sympathetic with everything everyone else has said on the call, and I understand, for example, Bill's desire to wait another week. I'm not sure what really we're going to learn in another week. So that's where I am.
Thanks. Mayor Zagoya, may I ask one more question, please, real quickly? I'm not in California right now, and I don't know how the testing is going. Is there any way that we can make sure that everybody that comes onto the site is tested? I mean, can there be a testing unit set up there? How hard is it to get tests done?
George?
At this point, it's done through your primary care physician. There's no independent testing facility that can be set up on site. And it's only upon
That's-
signs of symptoms,
You have to be symptomatic.
right?
That's just disappointing, I think.
Yeah, it's still rolling out. I do know on the San Mateo County call today, they talked about how the testing setup at the county fairgrounds is underutilized, but it isn't clear to me how somebody goes about getting tested there, because it has been primary care physician initiated, and I'm unaware of any way to get testing at a work site or somewhere. Bill, do you want to ask a question?
Yeah, my
No,
understanding.
but
Go ahead.
go
Go
ahead.
ahead, Elizabeth.
No, I was going to, but on Mayor DeGoya's comment, if it's underutilized, can we not, and it's not that far away, I mean, it's just up the road, can we not have our potential employees coming on site on our property go and drive through and get tested? Can we
Bill?
call the city manager,
I don't think
the
they'll
county
actually,
manager?
I don't think they'll do testing without system,
Yeah,
you know,
so
some
here,
sign.
the rule on testing is this: you have to have, fall into one of 3 or 4 categories. One is you have to be, if you're over 65, then they're willing to test you if you have some sort of health condition, even though it's not the symptomatic. Secondly, you have the fever or some of the other symptoms like losing your taste and things like that. They own the underutilization, if I remember right from the call, Rick, it was like 50 a day or something like that. But
Yeah.
it takes time. So they do the test, and it can take a week or more to get the results of the test back. It's not instantaneous yet. And so they're still working on that. But so somebody can't go to the fairground before they come here and say, here's the results of my test. It's, maybe they can next week, but they can't this week. And they have to have a reason for doing it.
And I believe it's primary care physician initiated, because I filled out the survey for testing, and I'm over 65, but I don't have a condition, and I was rejected.
Yeah. Oh, well.
So, let me give a comment. I think that the thoroughness of the attachment to the staff report that Amoroso did is extremely good. I was particularly pleased that they attached to their guidelines the form that needs to be acknowledged by each worker coming onto the site every day, that the subcommittee had prepared with the Builders Roundtable, and that form asks everyone coming onto the site whether they've had any cold or flu-like symptoms within the last 24 hours. I think it's really important in order to stem the spread that at a minimum we're making sure that anyone that feels at all ill doesn't come onto the site. I agree with Councilmember Lewis that a better solution would be to test everyone, because so many people tend to have this disease that are asymptomatic, but we don't have that methodology yet. I do think that these guidelines are a model, and that others in the county will look at them, because I don't think that anyone has prepared this level of thorough guidelines. I think they will go through changes, because this is a moving target, but it's what we have. I agree with what Mike said. I don't think it's going to be a material change. We just have to be flexible with it. I think that nobody wants someone who's got this illness to come on the site, because that's going to shut the site down or force those that were exposed to that person to quarantine, and that probably will shut the site down. So it's in everyone's interest to be extremely diligent to avoid having this virus come onto the site and to do everything that can be done to keep the site clean. So I'm pleased that the guidelines are so thorough. I am really worried overall about the economic impact of the response to the virus, and I 100% support the shelter in place. I do think that this is an essential project, and that we should reinitiate it. And I recognize that it's going to take a week or two before it begins to get going again. But I think it's the time to start, and I think it's a good message to send. And I think a lot of people will look at these guidelines. Now, my internet is going in and out, so if I'm not, if you can't hear me or I'm not responding to somebody, just somebody else pick it up.
I was going to say, you never look so good.
I was going to say that about you, Kerry.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Anybody else have a comment? Okay. There was no public comment at the beginning of this item. If there's any public comment now, then we will entertain that. Okay, I don't see any public comment. Do I have a motion? Do you need a motion, George?
I do. You need to make a motion that you determine that this project, or determine that the continuation of construction on the administration and police department facility constitutes an essential governmental function.
So moved.
I'll second that.
I actually have a question.
Go ahead.
And I know it's been seconded, I'm sorry. George, how do we deal with, making sure the mitigant, that deals with saying it's an essential government service or facility. How do we deal with the mitigants and the monitoring and all of that? Is that part of this motion, or is it a separate thing, or what is that?
It's considered part of the motion. So once you determine it an essential governmental function, it qualifies to continue construction under the county shelter in place. And then this entire plan that's been developed and attached goes into force. And staff will be monitoring it. The building official will be monitoring it, as well as the police department.
And if that's the case, I'd actually like to amend, if I can, that motion to include, and I need some help with this from the council and staff, but essentially at the first sign of an issue, I think that the council needs to be notified immediately. And we, staff may decide to pull the plug immediately. But I want to make sure there's no, that we're not inadvertently spreading this. And I don't know where to draw that line, but for me, that should be part of this. Any suggestions about how to include that, George, or anyone else?
I would just suggest you add that staff notify the council upon any issues that occur with the site for which we had to take action.
I would agree with that amendment.
Okay.
I'll agree with that. Oh, and so if I can just clarify for purposes of the record and for folks that are on, the motion is to move that the police portion of the Civic Center is categorized an essential governmental function, which shall make it exempt from the county's shelter in place order, allowing construction to occur, subject to the restrictions adopted by the council at its March 8th, 2020 special meeting, and as agreed upon by the contractor for this project, S.J. Amoroso.
As set forth in the study guidelines.
A slight change, I'm sorry, Mona, but prior to police station administration.
Administration and police station. That's what I was going to also say.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
And April 8th.
I'd also,
April 8th. Okay.
we talked about monitoring, and I'd like to authorize staff to be able to tighten down on these requirements if something comes up immediately. I don't want it to wait for a city council meeting or something.
Understood. I have that authority as the director of emergency services already.
Okay, great.
And I just want to make sure that these guidelines are part of the motion.
Yes.
Yes,
Absolutely.
absolutely.
Yes.
Okay, Anthony, can we do a roll call?
Yes, sir. Widmer,
I agree that the town center project is an essential government activity, but I do not agree that we should be moving forward with it as it stands today. So it's a two-part question for me. It's not a one-part question. Many other organizations have essential activities that they could be working on too, and they're not doing them. And I stand with them.
so if I could just ask for clarification from City Attorney, should we take this as a two-part motion then?
The motion has been made and it has been seconded, I believe, so we should take a roll call vote. However, Councilmember Widmer's nay vote can be reflected with his comments in the record.
Okay. Weist,
Aye.
Lemprus,
Aye.
Lewis,
Aye.
and DeGolia.
Aye. Do we have anything else, George?
We do not.
Okay, motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Good job. Let's get back to work.
Thank you, everybody.
All right, see you.
Aye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Good
all.
night.
Good job. Get back to work.